What's up, everybody? Today we are going to talk about my experiences in AAA, AA, and the single A or indie space. Just kind of sharing all of my experiences on it, and yeah, hopefully this is helpful for many of you who are potentially new or love to kind of understand what the differences are. Okay, so let's talk about AAA game studios, right? So let's start with the big boys. Think Rockstar, Naughty Dog, Ubisoft, Microsoft, EA, Riot, right? Like think about the really, really big studios. So let's talk about the pros. You're gonna have a bigger budget, bigger teams. You get access to cutting edge tech, um, highly polished projects, massive worlds, big IPs, right? So that's one pro. Another one is you're gonna be specialized, right? So you'll get really good at your craft because you're usually very focused on that one area. Then another pro is stability. Often these AAA studios will have more financial security and solid benefits like healthcare, vacation, RSPs or 401k matching, bonuses, all those things. Okay. And then the last pro that I'm going to throw out there is, when you have a AAA title on your resume, that usually that's usually a positive thing, and it's going to open up doors for you in the future. Now let's name some cons. Okay, crunch culture, that is still a very real thing to this day, in this modern day. You're gonna have crazy deadlines, you're gonna have delays, and overtime can hit hard. Um, Obviously, this is all depending on the studio and the studio culture, but it does exist. You will have less creative freedom. You are a piece in this huge puzzle. Um, Decisions are going to be made way above your pay grade, and sometimes you will disagree with it. Slow career growth. This is the last con here I'm going to mention. It can take years to move up unless you're actively pushing for your promotion, which can be exhausting. All right, let's move on to the AA studio space. So for this one, let's think the Remedies, right? The people who made Alan Wake and Control. Think Ninja Theory, the people who are making Hellblade series. Think Supermassive Games. Okay, let's name some pros. You're gonna have more creative input. You'll likely wear more hats, and your ideas will be heard, and some of them will actually make it into the game. You're gonna have more balanced teams. You're gonna have big enough. You'll have big enough for resources, but small enough for flexibility. You'll get less crunch time, maybe. Um, Generally you'll have a better work-life balance than like a AAA studio. But again, this all depends on how good your project management is at your studio and on your project. The last pro I'm gonna throw out there is going to be opportunity to grow. It's easier to stand out when you're in a smaller team, and because of that, you're gonna be able to move up the ladder in a leaner team. And you'll start to know, you might notice this with a lot of people in their career. Typically when they move into a smaller studio, they're getting promoted quicker. So let's name some cons. You're gonna have some budget constraints. You're not gonna have as much money as the AAA studios, which can limit your scope and your polish. Limited recognition in terms of public recognition, right? Like your project might not get the same media attention as like a AAA studio due to marketing budgets and things like that. So the last con that I want to throw out there for AA studios is it's still risky in terms of finances, right? Lots of AA studios can be hit or miss financially. So you are kind of taking that risk. Like if a project gets canceled or does not do well, that will heavily impact the studio. Okay, so now let's talk about the indie studios. Think Supergiant, right? The ones who made Hades and Bastion and Transistor. Think Team Cherry, the one who made Hollow Knight, or Concerned Ape, right? The solo developer who created Stardew Valley. So I'm gonna name some pros here. Creative freedom, right? Your voice matters a lot. You might even shape the entire project, right? You're gonna be wearing multiple hats. You know, an artist might have to do design, might need to animate, might also need to make the marketing material. It's a playground for generalists. Like generalists are huge here. Lots of indie studios love to hire generalists because of how many hats they're gonna need to wear. You're typically gonna have a stronger team bond because you're such a small team. You're gonna have a lot closer relationships with the people that you're working with. And then the last pro that I'm gonna throw here is remote friendly, right? Like many indies are fully remote and flexible in that regard. So if you're looking for remote work, a lot of the indie studios are going to be remote because they just have a small budget, right? They can't afford to have an office space, like an office building and stuff like that. It's just much cheaper to work from your own home. Now let's name some cons. You're likely going to have a lower pay and lower stability. You know, unless the game sells well, money is tight, and funding is always a hustle. Overwork risk is quite big here. You know, you're doing everything, right? So burnout here tends to happen quite a bit, and you can hear this in a lot of the indie vlogs and journals of a lot of these indie developers. Then lastly, fewer resources. You know, you're gonna have less tech funding, less QA, marketing budget. It's all in this little tight limited budget that you're gonna have, and everything needs to fit in there. You know, every studio size is gonna have its pros and cons, and honestly, what's gonna fit for you might change over time, right? For me, my journey started off at an indie studio working on adult video games, which it's weird to say now, but to think back, I was there for about 6.5 years, and that's how I started. That's where I got my experience. And a lot of the stuff that I'm mentioning here, I got to experience all of that. And then I went to AAA, and I got to experience all that, right? And then decided it was time to try out indie again, right? So went to a small studio, and the difference was quite massive between AAA to indie, and then went to a AA studio. Really enjoyed that time there, and then now I'm back at AAA. So things will change, and I think I'm very grateful that I've had the opportunity to work on all three different sizes of studios, different cultures of studios, and you know, you'll find which one fits best for you. But at the end of the day, if you're starting out, you can't really be picky. You're gonna have to just try and get as much experience as possible, get something on your resume, get that experience, and then yeah, hopefully this video was helpful, and I'll see you all next time. Bye.